Hey, Holy Crow, we are going live any second now. Who do you want to do a shout out to?
I want to do a shout out to the Poetry Society of New York. Thank you so much for trusting me for the last 7 years as your divination master.
Awesome. Here we go. Everybody, our guest today is Holy Crow. Holy Crow teaches divination magic for the queer, trans, and non-binary community. They also specialize in handmade jewelry, illustrations, and production. Holy Crow, thank you so much for being here. I have so many awesome questions to ask you.
Thank you so much for having me.
So let's jump right into it. First of all, let's just get term out of the way. What is divination magic?
So, divination magic is a part of the process that a lot of different traditions will tap before diving into other work. So, divination, the basic idea goes back to something called the Emerald Tablet, which is where we get the phrase as above, so below. So, the idea is that the ancients saw the world as sort of mechanically pulled by planetary and astral forces, and so reading the stars up above would give you an idea of what the energy was going to do down below. There's so many different styles of divination. People will look at birds, they'll read entrails, they'll throw sand and read this the way the sand falls. The idea is that whatever style of divination works best for you is really the one that you should try. Most people are really more familiar with tarot as a way to reflect. And the idea is that if these energies are here, that it will show up. It will show up and give you some guidance on what your question is. And so the other piece is that divination is incredibly helpful for creating an internal dialectic. So a way to have a conversation with yourself and create an accountability structure to reflect on what you're personally working on in your life.
So I never thought of tarot as divination. I didn't understand that until I was this many seconds old in life. So thank you for that. Now, so the divination basically is, would we call it fortune telling? Would we call it seeing? What do we call it?
Yeah, it's all of those things. So, divination is pulling information from the divine. It is trying to figure out what is likely to happen given the current set of circumstances. And so, you know, uh, there are, lots of different belief systems around that. However, I Ching is divination, casting shells is divination, throwing dice is divination. Um, you can do divination with playing cards, you can do divination with tarot, you can do divination. But the idea is that, just raw reading somebody is slightly different. The divination process uses some kind of tool.
Okay, so you have to have a tool. In other words, if someone says they're a psychic and they're just coming up with something, I don't know how psychics do it, but without the tool, that is not that divination.
Well, in my opinion, I draw a differentiation between intuition and psychic ability. That intuition for me is actually stems from logic. This is something that I've learned from palm reading, because I'm a palm reader also, that highly logical people also tend to be very intuitive, because intuitive is those sudden leaps. You could also call it, it's called claircognizant, that some people have sudden flashes of knowledge where everything becomes clear in a moment. But intuition comes from your body knowledge, that mind body connection, the somatic history that you've experienced, that you're kind of like integrating information and then it becomes clear. You intuit it, that it's a logical conclusion. Psychic ability is accessing something outside of yourself, where you're either reading somebody's energy, that's psychic ability. You're even reading body language could be psychic,
Mhm.
but accessing other entities or intelligences is psychic ability. But and with divination, you might draw on both of those.
Gotcha. I just have to ask this because it's happened so many times in my life, and I'm sure other people have too, where you go like, I knew that was going to happen, and I should have gone the other way. I knew this was going to happen. How do you know yourself, or how would you teach somebody to know the difference between that gut feel and then afterwards going like, oh, I knew that was going to happen?
So there's a couple of things. I think that what I like to point out to people is that, we do say gut feeling. That is quite literal. I mean, I personally feel sensations in that area of my body. So that's where the paradigm of chakra systems becomes very helpful, where you're talking about energy centers so that these emotions and these experiences are physically centered in different places. That when you're
Mhm.
heartbroken, you feel it in your heart chakra. When you feel like your voice is stifled, then your throat might act up. If you're feeling incredibly, at sea in terms of being able to pay the bills, or feeling like you're, unmoored where you're living, that might affect your root chakra. You'll have back pain. If you feel blocked in being able to see what you want to see in the future, you might have a headache. These things are very literal. And so part of the process is, and part of what I think is the most therapeutic part of witchcraft and magic and divination, is learning to connect the physical sensations in your body with your knowledge, with your experience, so that, that gut feeling is literal. That'll tell you something. But so many times people were raised to ignore it. They were told that they needed to trust an authority and not themselves. So part of the process is accepting yourself as an authority, accepting your own voice as an authority, accepting yourself as an agent of your own transformation and change and growth. And that's sort of the beginning of the process of coming home to yourself and your body. And like, not like, sometimes we, in traumatic moments, then we escape away from our bodies, and so part of it is coming back. So those, if you have that moment of like, oh man, I knew this was going to happen,
Mhm.
or I felt in my gut that this person, trust it. Trust it,
That is
with
the
the knowledge that, question your bias as well. Question your bias. If you're
yeah.
fearful of somebody, ask yourself why. But if you get that very specific gut feeling, that then, really trust it, be on alert.
Yeah, I think that is the best explanation of. I love how you connected the gut with the chakras and the heart chakra and the throat, and that I never really thought about it that way. And that's a really good explanation of the chakras and how you should trust your gut. Um,
I did religious studies undergrad, and we actually studied some of this in class, believe it or not. I took a class called Magic, Science, and Religion. And even then, really understanding that, there's a physicality to emotions, that, we're just starting to learn more about, the vagus nerve that runs from the brainstem down to the gut. That is a huge part of the nervous system. And that polarity is where we experience so many of these emotions. So, the relationship, science and magic are not at odds with each other. They're not opposites.
I
They're
like it. I like it. So,
friends.
so let's talk about how is it that we now take this the divination magic, and how does that apply to the queer, trans, non-binary community, and how have you used it in that sense?
So I was fortunate enough to help found and run a collective called the Witchpunk Collective in Salem, Massachusetts. We had a pretty simple mission of just creating community to keep trans people alive under our former president. So, and part of that was building community and making community spaces. And also part of it was private ritual. Some of it was public ritual. And some of it was just conversation, just time to sit and talk about magic, talk about what's the most helpful parts, what really works, what is really, the most effective for people. And so, for us, there were a lot of, um, you know, gender barriers in the pagan
Mhm.
community. I actually grew up as a witch, and I was fortunate enough to be able to have access to ritual spaces, even starting at 12 and 13 years old. Um, but during that time, the goddess movement was in full effect. And that meant that, a lot of people really associated paganism with goddess worship. You'll hear a lot of talk about, the feminine principle or divine masculine. And, because uh, our group was all non binary, we wanted to throw a lot of that language out and figure out how can we talk about this without excessively gendering things. Like sometimes you do want some genders, that's fine. But for us, we wanted to see what we could take out to make it more accessible for people so that they don't feel like if they don't identify as a woman or as a man, that there's still a place for them in magic, that there's still a way to talk about it. And in my opinion, this is part of the real work of being non-binary, is that we're doing that work to help liberate everybody. Liberating people from very strict gender roles, has been the mission even in the cis world, for a long time. So, we're breaking a lot of that down. And, what that means is that, for example, instead of talking about feminine is cool and dark and passive and receptive, and masculine is dynamic and active and solar and bright. And, you know, that we're saying, okay, forget that. Gender is just a metaphor here. So we don't actually have to use it. So we say projective magic and we say receptive magic rather than masculine and feminine, and that way, you're free to kind of tap whatever is helpful to you in the moment without questioning, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, talk about the tarot cards in that same sense, because you had mentioned before that the tarot has certain cards that seem to be either masculine or feminine. How does that work?
Yeah, so in the tarot deck, I like to use the Rider Smith Waite deck that was drawn by Pamela Coleman Smith. The Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn did believe that, in pairing up with women, women were a part of the occult movement during that time, which is really cool. It's one of the things that I do really enjoy about them. So she drew the deck. She actually got acquainted because she had illustrated things for James Joyce, and she had done backdrops for operas, and so
Huh.
she drew the entire deck in 6 months, which is crazy
Wow.
to me. Um, the originals have been lost because of the London bombing, most likely during World War II. But
Okay.
but basically, she put some people that she knew into the deck. She deliberately made some things very androgynous, um, and she also some of the characters are hermaphroditic in the classical alchemical sense of part Hermes, part Aphrodite. Some of the characters, like the Emperor, is totally masculine, and he's on a throne. There's nothing growing because he's pure masculine energy, which in their cosmology means that he can't create things because there's no feminine energy there to create, and so everything is dead and barren. There's nothing growing. There's rock. That's also because he's connected to Mars and Aries and war and kingship, and so that's telling a story. That doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that it's essentially masculine
Mhm.
to have all those traits. It's illustrating the concept of this planetary energy for you.
So when you talk about uh, divination magic, when we talk about having tools, when we talk about um, foreseeing things in the future, a lot of people just think of that as just completely nonsensical. And the more I talk to people like you and my other guests, the more I'm seeing there is some science behind all of this. and people are still denying the science. What are you finding about people who deny the science and don't want to believe? What's your expertise there?
Well, my perspective is that belief doesn't matter because
Mhm.
what really matters is experience, that gnosis, that direct experience, that direct interaction with the divine. So, you can, you people who don't believe in ghosts see ghosts all the time. Why is that? Because it's an experience. So, the conclusions you draw from that experience are culturally informed. And, so people always ask me, do you get a lot of skeptics? And I'm like, no, because I'm not because skeptics are skeptical about believing. I'm not asking you to believe something. I'm just asking you to sit down and have a conversation with me. So, and we're using the cards as a way to do it. Now, for me, I don't actually even ask my clients generally to tell me what their question is. I'll just pull the cards and answer it. So they don't even have to tell me. I'll just tell
That's
them.
fabulous.
And, I think that people have a lot of misconceptions. There are also people like bad actors out there in the world that have a bad example of what, fiction could be as well. But, in general, the people that I know who are readers, the really strong, amazing thing that being a tarot reader can do is that it really is peer to peer counseling. It's mutual aid. It's an opportunity to heal trauma on a community level. That's what we were doing with our shows. We would have 5 or 6 different readers in the room. People could go around. We had sliding scales so that people could access it. It was during a time where people were isolated. They needed that connection. They needed somebody to listen. They needed a safe space. They need spiritual counseling. What I mean by spiritual counseling, I mean you need counseling to guide your spirit, to feel connected to your spirit, to what your voice is, what you have to give. Sometimes we feel very beaten down. So it's an opportunity to have a conversation with somebody who is going to say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? The cards are asking this. The cards are bringing this up. Every card in the tarot deck has a lesson to teach. It's asking a question. The major arcana are asking big questions about your life, big questions about your journey. The minor arcana are asking more day-to-day questions. It'll be about conflict, or it'll be about stress or anxiety, or needing to retreat, or
Mhm.
making a decision, or satisfaction level, or what have you. Those are the types of things that come up. Decisions that need to be made, messages. And the majors are asking bigger questions about karmic turning points, or major shakedowns in belief systems. So the patterns emerge. I mean, what do we do with a scientific background? We're looking at what the patterns are. For me, the stats are pretty clear. It's very effective. It's the I'm always like, hey, look at the stats. Hang around and you'll see.
Do, have you seen with the different tools that people use, whether they're doing the divination with the tarot or the palms or with the animal entrails or sand or anything else, that you get different answers to the same questions, or the answers, do they pretty much line up?
So I think that, for me personally, because I do two styles publicly pretty frequently, I'll do palm reading and tarot. People get to choose which one they want. Sometimes they want both. So almost every time when I, read a palm and then pull cards, or read cards and then look at the palm, you know, the messages stay very consistent to me. That being said, a second reader who's tapping their own wisdom and their own, entities that are helping, or however they're approaching it, they may have a different perspective. But I've also had instances, somebody, and in the last public venue that I was reading in, somebody went to my colleague and went to me, and we both pulled the same card separately. She told me at the end of our reading, as the
Excellent.
signifier. So, it does happen. It happens a lot that we will get similarities. And that's because of that idea that if these energies exist, if you're looking and you're pulling something that is going to somehow be affected by the energies in the way that you're pulling a pattern, then it'll be consistent, you know.
Okay. What do you want people to take away from everything that we've been talking about? If you're just going like, this is it. I want everyone to understand this, whether you're cis or whether or not it's LGBTQ, if it's anything else. What do you want people to really learn from what we're discussing today?
Just that, you have the opportunity to be liberated in your life, that you have the opportunity to grow, that if you're suffering from a hurt or a trauma right now, that it's possible. It's possible to heal. It's possible for it to change. It's possible for things to get better. And that, these very reflective tools give you a way to be able to do that for yourself or for your friends in a way that sort of says, well, I didn't say it, the cards did, so it
Mhm.
helps you to distance yourself from it and to have, an oracle at home that you can talk to sort of say, well, do I need to think about that right now? Am I worried about my job all of a sudden? Do I need to focus on this? Is there conflict that won't resolve at work? And sort of give you a chance to create a new narrative about what you're going through. That is the incredibly transformative power about divination, is that it is a way to approach your situation with a new story, with a new perspective.
That that sums it up. That makes it just so easy for me to understand. Thank you so much. I want people to be able to get in touch with you. And for people that don't know, because we didn't talk about it, is you've got some amazing artwork that you do and jewelry.
Thank
And
you.
we're going to have you back on to talk about that. I also want to talk sometime in the future about Salem because that seems like a cool place to be at times.
Salem is
And
a
I really
wild place.
say that again.
Salem is a wild place. If you don't know, we throw the biggest Halloween party in the world every year for every single day of October.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being on, and I could look forward to you being on again.
Thank you
Okay,
so much. I would love to come back. I look forward to talking to you more.
talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.